have all of you on this Saturday's episode of Shagalenko. My name is Ambassador Emmanuel, and thanks for finding time to join us. Live from two destinations, Shaga TV um, page and Shagalenko TV Facebook page. If you have issues joining us at any point, either on Facebook or YouTube, switch. Okay, today we'll look at COVID-19 and what should people begin to do differently in the line of duty. Now, it had when no one expected, no country was even prepared for it, and countries that had great and fantastic health infrastructures also body and all of that. You know, countries that even migrating from their countries to such countries still had that burden. So today we're looking at how we can leave the new norm where it is like now, airspaces are opening up their border spaces, people movements, traveling, you know, in the line of duty. I'm looking at also professionals, you know, field workers, medicals, people who render services that if there is for people have to access their service. Once again, my name is Ambassador Emmanuel Gabar. I'm joined by two very fantastic Chinasa U Imo is an international development and global health policy strategist, all the way from Chicago in the United States of America. And I have Dharrnesha Rajah. She's a public policy expert and a MEND associate also in Chicago, United States of America. Let me welcome them and then ask them to introduce themselves properly, and then we'll take it up from there. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to have you. You all have been amazing. This show is gonna be wonderful. so we start from when I had a female ladies first, but tied females, wonderful females. So where do I go? Who will start first? The ball is in your court.
Chinasa, go ahead.
Okay, it's fine. Okay, I'll just introduce myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Chinasa U Imo, and like Ambassador Emmanuel has already said, I'm public health policy strategist, and you know me. I've been in this show for a very long time. I keep coming, so I don't think I should be reeling out my resume anymore when I come to Shagalenko. Emmanuel, what do you think? Let's give Dharrnesha the time to introduce herself. Thank you.
Thank you, Chinasa. I was going to say you are on this show. Anyway, Dharrnesha, over to you. Welcome.
Sure, thank you. It's a great introduction, Chinasa. So, hi everyone. My name is Dharrnesha, and I am originally from Malaysia. I'm currently in Chicago. I have experience in public policy space, in financial inclusion, in health and social policies. Now I'm in Chicago, and I am doing some work in economic and urban development, and also research with global health. And I'm also a partner with MEND Associates, which is a public policy partnership back in Malaysia. Thank you.
You see, this is why we need to give Dharrnesha all the time. Thank you very
much. Okay, so messages are already come. This one is from Titia Inbah. It says hello from Kuala Lumpur. Wow, that's a good one. So
that's my sister.
Yeah, so she's away from Malaysia. Yeah. So yes, when watch and then you drop your comments, know where you're noting from, and channel your questions, and we'll take them. My guest will answer. Okay, so let's come to you, Dharrnesha. Come to Chinasa. What are some of the myths that people exhibit in this fight against COVID? Sometimes when you are in some public space, as with you being a policy expert, people still are worried to take issues of public health so seriously. So I'll come to Chinasa, but let me hear you, Dharrnesha. What's your worry about that people carry around?
I think, I think the main worry is that we will be in a perpetual pandemic, right? And for some countries, in a perpetual lockdown, and whatever that lockdown may be. It could be a full lockdown when no one goes out. It could be a different variation of it where, you can only operate in essential areas and whatnot. So that is probably at the back of most people's mind, like you and I. Like, is this it? Is this the life and the environment that we have to get used to? And do I have that support? And more often than not, it may not be enough support in terms of, say, from your work environment, from, say, a larger public policy perspective, or even from a community perspective. So I think, like, starting from the baseline, that is the worry people have at the back of our minds.
Okay. So let me come to Chinasa. To ask you the same. You move around a lot, search for surveys and all of that. It's still shocking that thing is one falla where is just trying to, or countries are just putting XY and just get monies and all of that. When you even tell them the figures, they see it like, oh, is this, is that. What is your worries as you go to the field, Chinasa?
So the problem with public health, and public health has an intersection with human behavior. So when you combine the two, you get healthy living. But then when we talk about public health, the other side is governance, the other side is policy, the other side is health response. So you see that there's a trajectory that culminates to public health, and in between, it's like a Pandora box. When you open it, there's a trust issue between we, the people, or say them, the people, and government, the people who make the governance, the people who make laws, the people who also implement the laws, who also punish for the law. And when this distrust is in the middle of all these public health issues, we begin to have, a fallout between what government think is the right thing and what people think they want to do. And remember, when it comes to human behavior, an ordinary human being wants to behave the way he or she wants to, without restriction to their freedom. Now, we cannot say where your freedom ends is where mine begins. So we have to be accountable. But how do we become accountable to ourselves, between us and government, if there is no trust existing? So that is the problem that has, engulfed the public health space. It doesn't really matter if it's COVID. We saw it with Ebola. We see it even with cholera. We see it even with heat rashes. You understand? When people don't trust what government is saying, what government is doing, they go the other way. And going the other way doesn't solve issues. It doesn't solve any problem. So at the end of the day, we find ourselves elongating, a response that could have taken a shorter time, to curb. So that is my worry. My worry is, how do we build this trust? How do we entrust that, government is helping us to ensure that we fight the virus? Will government also ensure that humans will obey simple precautionary measures that is life-saving? So if we try to figure out how best to do this, then the pandemic, like Dharrnesha said, will not be so much of a worry on whether it's going to be forever, whether it's going to be a new life, if only we come together to put into consideration these things to ensure that we have transparency and accountability in the processes that we are using to respond to the outbreak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for that incisive one. So people, in case you just joined us now, this is the Saturday's Peace program, and I have with me here two wonderful ladies, and Dharrnesha, and together we at the new norm, begin to live the new norm. How does school open up spaces and make sure are guided COVID-19 guide, all of that. I'll come back to Dharrnesha. If you could see some of the message, you'll read one of Susanna, and then I'll ask Chinasa to also read the other one, and then both of you can respond. Hello, Dharrnesha, I'll
Okay,
take this one
now I
from
can hear you.
Susanna. Oh, okay. Sorry. One from Susanna and the second one, Chinasa will also respond.
Sure. So I think there is definitely, some, I would say there is definitely truth in this. So the thing about cloth masks is it is effective, but it's not too effective to the point that you can stop the more contagious variant. So what is very important when you're having a cloth?
Sorry, Dharrnesha.
Yep.
Sorry, Dharrnesha. There are people with disabilities that may not see the message on the screen. So I'd like you to
Right.
read it out. Yeah, so they will understand what you are reading
Oh
to.
yeah, of course. Of
Yeah.
course. So let's see. So the comment says your cloth or paper mask is a moist bacteria, fungi, virus collector that's made dirtier with hand-delivered germs that are easily sucked through the cloth or paper mask fiber when you inhale. Now, so what I was getting at was the first part of it, which is your cloth mask. So the thing about cloth masks is it can be effective when you have filters in it. So we have many different types of cloth masks out there that are mainly for, like a better word, just for fashion, for style, without the actual filter mechanism that you would have to insert and you have to change. And the thing again with cloth masks is you have to ensure the hygiene of it. You have to keep washing it after every use. So it becomes a place for breeding and for breeding for germs and whatnot when you just keep using it without by ignoring the hygiene purposes. So that's one part that's very important for us to take into account, the functional properties of it. Now, in terms of paper mask, it's if you're talking about 3-ply, 4-ply, N95 masks, these are actually designed for its practicality. These are designed for this functionality of actually, of actually being a barrier that keeps your own vapors within you, and then your external vapors are external, right? So it's meant to be so the internal part is meant to be water resistant to a certain extent. The external part is supposed to be the final barrier. Now, again, you're not supposed to reuse it. So all of these things depends on your hygiene practices with it. You don't reuse cloth masks without washing it. You don't reuse your 3-ply mask like 300 times. That doesn't make sense. Your N95 as well. So when you do all of these things, yes, it becomes a breeding ground and it can defeat the purpose. So it's really important to understand these practices individually.
Thank you so much. So Chinasa, take this other message from Susanna again, and then you can respond to it before I come to the other questions that I'll ask both of you.
Okay, so Susanna said vaccines are used to test biological weapons used to spread diseases. They are used for targeted genocide. Guyleen Lanchet MD, author of The Medical Mafia. Okay, so trying to understand this, I think this take us back to the mythology of the virus and the production of vaccine. But let's take a step back and look at the history of vaccines. So before now, we've had issues of polio, we've had various child killer diseases, especially for under 5 children, that increased their chances of dying from preventable diseases. And through vaccines, we've been able to cut those or minimize those mortalities. So what will this author or professor now say? What will be his backing with this kind of mythology? I'm not ignorant of the fact that some pharmaceutical industries, some organizations do a lot of biological testing on humans, on animals, and all whatnot. But this is not the issue with COVID. So let's not even drag it that far. I don't want to engage on, trying to validate the myths that's been going on about, different haywires of, biological weapons against human beings. We've seen people die from COVID, and we've seen people being saved by taking the vaccine. So let's do the rightful things first as humans. Be accountable to yourself and family. Go and become fully vaccinated. I am, and I don't think that the biological weapon has been installed to explode inside of me. So let's go and be accountable for our health, for the health of our community first, before we start, digesting all the myths and, crazy ideologies that, that surrounds this, COVID outbreak.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah. Thank you so much. And it's like we knew this way, also able to address the needs and all of that. And they keep increasing. I remember when I took my second dose, a lot of friends will call early mornings and like, are you not a zombie? Can you still breathe? We hear when you take it, you will have horns. It was strange. One even bring phone to put on my that they hear you vaccinate. Your arm is magnetic, and then a phone can so many bits here and there. So I'll come back to Dharrnesha again and ask this: so how do we also begin to prepare spaces for the new norm? Like I said when we started, countries just realized that we can't be locked down forever. Human beings are people are very mobile. You never people will go to the market. People will go for bodies. People will, even if you say everyone should stay home, health workers, military men, security agencies must go out to enforce the law. So it's bringing us back to the existence and the issue that we all need to be on the moving train at some point. So what do you think as a public expert? And so do you think government, even citizens should begin to do this? For stolen and trying to prevent what has COVID.
Sure. Now, I think there are three prongs that we can think about it. One is from an individual perspective. One is from, say, your businesses, your workplaces perspective. And another one is from a government and policy perspective. Now, from the very fundamental level, from an individual perspective, it just touches a little bit of what I mentioned earlier, personal hygiene when you're wearing your masks and whatnot. But just taking a step back, always have a mask on. We have seen how it helps. We have seen the efficiency of it, the efficacy of it as well. Get yourself vaccinated, as in when you're able to, get yourself vaccinated. Make sure you are socially distanced as much as possible. So these are like the basic things, that you need to have. Personal hygiene, make sure you wash your hands. Very basic things that we know we were thought of as kids back in school, but we take it for granted. And now we're in a time where it's reminding us to keep reiterating these things and keep using these perspectives and these practices. Now, in a workplace, I think what's really important as we come back is there is an onus on you to make sure that your staff, your workers, whether you're in the office or whether you're field workers, that they are safe. Now, by safe, what does that mean? It means that you look at ways to provide the tools to ensure that they're safe. And these tools could be your masks. It could be hand sanitizers, whatnot. Now, these may seem as very small things, but they are cost. They add up to people, for people to keep having them. For example, self-testing kits for COVID. Even like your oximeter to show to monitor how much oxygen levels do you have in your body, your bloodstream. And so these are really small things that we should actually ensure that our staff is equipped. So, and one more thing that I probably want to mention, and this probably touches on the policy bit, would be ensuring that the workplace, the environment is safe. Now, the most basic thing that we could look into is ventilation. We know that COVID, the virus is airborne, coronavirus is airborne. So what do we do to ensure that the general environment is safe? So ventilation is very important. Make sure you keep updating on your ventilation. Make sure for basic things, keep your windows up when there's possible, have fans around, try not to be in an enclosed space. So it does take into account a couple of different planning, a couple of different, more long-term foresight. And this is where a larger policy perspective can come in. How can government ensure that they have larger guidelines for smaller businesses or even larger businesses to follow? And then second thing is, how can they support that maybe monetarily for your smaller, SME businesses? And final thing I would say would be in terms of data. Make sure that there is availability of data for people to truly understand what is happening and implement it in different sectors as and when it is relevant. So we can go into this in further detail later, but this is just a rough overview.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm trying to get Chinasa back, but Chinasa is not back. I wanted her to talk about some of the things encountered in her field work, because Dharrnesha is still worrisome that when after the lockdown and they opened up spaces, they still find that people almost relaxed, public spaces where they had hand sanitizers, water and soap before they allow you in. Even find sometimes that the water would not be there, even the hand sanitizer would have been very long, overused. I even hear in some places they mix it, they dilute and like pour water in sanitizer just because maybe inspecting health will just pass and they will see there's a hand sanitizer here, but limited of in, so it becomes larger quantity. I was going to answer that, but here yet. So I'd like you to take that question. How are you worried when you go to public spaces like restaurants? I think there are places where people still maintain some of the guidelines. Is like airports, hospitals, and maybe very big ones. Smaller ones don't really care. In fact, sometimes they tell come in. It's wrong. We don't have COVID. Come and buy. So how worried are you when you get to such public space and you don't find of this guy observed?
Sure. I think like even before going to the more rural areas and whatnot, even in cities, like I'll give an example. I mean, I'll give US as an example. Everything is, you can't enforce it, right? As much as there is a mandate, you cannot enforce it because of the Bill of Rights. So you have that social capital, that trust. So they're literally trying to leverage on that social trust. If you're vaccinated, so you have signs everywhere saying if you're fully vaccinated, then masking is optional. But what are you doing to ensure that you know for sure that your patrons are fully vaccinated? External, outdoors or indoors. So these are kind of things that, do pop up at the back of my mind. Like, am I going to be in a safe environment wherever I am? Now, in outdoors, I think there is a bit of a lax perspective, and there is some base to that because, again, ventilation, even a small breeze of wind actually helps with the ventilation of air and for it not to be limited in a certain place. But I think just going back to the example that you mentioned, at the top of my mind, two things come up. One is, I think it's just the mindset or like your perspective that you have, right? And that is also perspective that, it's fine. Maybe I've gotten vaccinated, maybe I've not gotten vaccinated, but it's fine. COVID, is not going to, or rather coronavirus is not going to affect me or us because we have other health remedies that we're using. Secondly is really the cost. As I've mentioned earlier, like these things do build up on cost, and especially if you are coming from a small businesses perspective, or you're coming from a municipality that doesn't have very deep pockets, all these things do add up. And when you are cash strapped, or when you have this dilemma between providing sanitizers, masks, and whatnot that you cannot see the deliverable right away, compared to say fixing the sewers because you could see how that's affecting say the population there, then that is a choice that's already made because you see the tangibles, right? So these two things are really the underlying I would say, underlying factors that do affect even maybe not the bigger cities, but actually the second bit, maybe not the bigger cities. Perspective affects everyone wherever you are.
Yeah, thank you very much. Chinasa is still not back, so that leaves me and you
Sure.
to start this. Yes. So watching us. This is Saturday's edition of Shagalinku with your sincerely Ambassador Emmanuel Gabari, and we're looking at COVID-19, new norm. What should people begin differently in the line of duty? What should professionals? What should salesmen? What should people who airports, at the parks, places have to render, what should our security men begin to do differently? Our health work. They were worse during the pandemic. They were frontliners, and some were slow in providing the equipment that they needed, and so that hit them most, and caregivers, victims themselves, and also we'll look at all of these comments for our guests, questions. Please drop it in the comment section, and they will respond to them. I'm here with Dharrnesha and Chinasa all the way from Chicago, United States of America. We're looking at all of these. Dharrnesha, I'd like to mention something about policy. So I think a lot of countries have beautiful and fantastic policies. But basically, where I have a grouse is the nation. I was also going to ask Chinasa about this, because I know a lot of countries in Africa, implementation of is a big deal, a huge issue. So what do you think about Dharrnesha? How do we begin to also hold a policy accountable and make sure that they implement some of these policies? So you take that, and then Azain, I think she's back now. Please go on.
Sure. Chinasa's back from her field work. I think it's a universal issue, right? Like anything, any policy, any strategy, implementation is always an issue, because it's a different ball game altogether. It's a different machinery. You can have beautiful strategies on paper. You can have all these great concepts and ideas, but if you don't have people, and if you don't understand truly the practicality and the challenges of these implementation plans, then you are, for lack of a better word, screwed. And we've seen this even before the pandemic, but not as such large scale. But now during the pandemic, we see it at really large scales, especially all across countries of different developing perspectives. From the most developed country, we've seen that affecting Italy early last year, to developing countries, which we are seeing right now as well. So what is truly important is inclusivity. You need people from different perspectives, different stakeholders brought to the table, and really saying and airing out what they need, what are the challenges, and also the timeline. So these are really important things to take into account. And also another thing about, I think, implementation is having that, and especially if it's coming from a governance perspective, having your checks and balances in place, having your checks and balances, build into that perspective, and making it a public accountability element to be in that account as well. It's easier said than done, especially during the current environment where everything needs to be go, go, go. If not, you have what is the other perspective of it? You have people dying. It's straight up, people are dying still, even with the vaccines being rolled out. But that's also another perspective. That's also another challenge in its way, right? Because you have the very slow rollout of vaccine in developing countries that are relying on COVAX. So the most important thing I would say is actually bringing different stakeholders to the table. So it can be community workers, your government officials, public policy officials, your private sector people, and even your citizens, your civilians. It needs to be taken into account. You need to hear from the horse's mouth what are their needs, and when, and what are the challenges. And then secondly is to build a check and balance element into that plan, into that implementation strategy. Hi, Chinasa, welcome back.
Yeah. So Chinasa, how was your field work? I was going to ask you to take us through if it's something you'd like to, I'd like you to take us through the recent field work you're doing, and also how you've been able, what you've seen, because what we hear on radio and see on TV might just be different. Every time I go to the rural areas or communities, I am amazed and shocked sometimes too, because it's like night and day. You're saying something different from the media, and you're seeing the real life issues from the individuals in the rural area. So, Chinasa, would you like to take us through some of those things you saw that were shocking and that you want to take back? Unmute your mic.
Okay, yeah. So I said no, I wouldn't then, but I take it back. So I'm here in Ghana. First, I started off from the Ashanti region all the way up to the central region, going to different communities, conducting health need assessments, to be able to, identify what the challenges are, all the way from, the ground up, the community level, before we even talk about, the urban health and all that. And Ambassador Emmanuel, rural health is one thing that government for over a long time, we talk about it, we make a lot of cases about it, we make noise in the global environment about it, but it's so shocking that every time you go to the community, you still meet the same things, you still see the same issues. There are communities you go to, you will not find a health center. 30-kilometer stretch, no health center, no accessible road, nothing. And yet we are in a space of pandemic, making a whole lot of noise on TV, radio, doling out policies and laws that is just impracticable because of the conditions that we have positioned the health sector generally. So I don't always like to talk in detail about my work because it's sensitive, but it's bad. It's bad. Just let's leave it at the fact that at the point that it is very, very bad, um, because you see a lot of issues women don't have access to health facility, not even immunization. Like, you'll be asking, so what do you think you would need for your quality of life in terms of healthcare delivery to be improved? They don't know. They don't know what to answer you because they have never. It's like, asking someone with zero knowledge about healthcare. He doesn't even know how to access it. In fact, he doesn't even know what healthcare, and you're coming with, so what can we do to improve your quality of life? The person is not even thinking about quality, he's just thinking about life. That is how bad it is in rural communities. And now imagine when such viruses or infectious disease break out in places like this, or transferred to this kind of interior areas where they don't have. What I mean by they don't have access to care, health care, is like there is no dispensary, there is not even a quack chemist selling some form of drugs or medicine. That is that level I'm talking about when you say zero access to care. For before they have access to care, they will take bike, and traveling on bike or walking for 30 kilometers is a long distance, not comparable to having a car and just zooming off on a motorable way to some choice health facility that you have picked to because you live in urban area. So it's a big issue, and every now and then we keep having different kinds of outbreak. COVID is mutating from this. Now we are battling with the Delta variant. You understand? This is not the end of pandemic. I bet you that when we are done with this in the next 2-3 years, there will be something else that will come up because there's an interface between environment and human life. You understand? So there will always be outbreak. What is that mechanism that, or what is that lessons that we've learned as a people, as government, as policymakers, as healthcare providers, to ensure that we cover, the stretch of healthcare provision from, the up all the way to, the rural area, so that we have a clear cut, strategies, SOPs on how to respond on these things. So that is where the challenge lies now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is one talk about that a little, even though you're a bit hesitant to do all that, because sometimes, I like bringing the perspective from my guest angle, because when you talk about some of these things in conferences and workshops, people just think they are made up stories. It's shocking even when we talk about menstrual health, and I go to rural areas and I see young girls use leaves as sanitary pads. So when I talk about it anyway, people can't believe it, but these are realities. So I'll come back to you, Dharrnesha. Let's talk about any projects that you're currently on, whether in your country of residence or your country of origin. What are some of the disparities that are going on, and what are the challenges that you have been facing in some of these things?
Sure. Chinasa, before that, I want to say I absolutely agree with you. It's very different when you're on the ground and you actually see what's happening than people talking at the round table and saying, okay, this is what you need, this is what our people need, without actually knowing what is the real situation. So I absolutely agree with that. So in terms of some of the things I've been working on, so I'm currently in Chicago and working on a breast cancer research and pretty much a breast cancer research and current sort of perspectives on its management and what can we do to improve the provisions of your health and also for management of it. So in terms of like your treatments and whatnot. So I'm working currently with the Lancet Commission under Dr. Fumi Olopade. She's the director of the Center of Global Health. So that is really interesting for me because what that does is it gives me that interface with academics and also your specialists in that area to kind of see where they're coming from, but also tying with like a policy perspective to see, right, is this actually workable? Is this feasible? Because sometimes there's a disconnect. More often than not, there's a disconnect between your technocrats, your academics, and also your, I suppose, policy practitioners and your actual implementers. So I'm working on that. And then another thing I'm doing, I'm working with a nonprofit in Chicago, south suburbs of Chicago, which if for those who are not familiar, it is one of the neighborhoods within Illinois that has one of the highest inequality rates in terms of your income level, your housing, basic needs, and even in terms of your infrastructure and whatnot. So what I'm working on with the nonprofit is in terms of urban development and economic development, where we're trying to bring back businesses, bring back investment flows into this area. This is one of the areas in Chicago and in Illinois, actually, that was most affected by the global financial crisis that happened in 2009. So a lot of vacant properties, a lot of vacant land, people left in. There's a lot of urban decay that's happening. And so that's one of the things I'm working on. Back in Malaysia, I'm also working on a couple of different policy projects. And one of it is a policy partnership with a couple of my previous colleagues called Mentor Associates. And some of the challenges I've seen really data availability. I think this is universal. Wherever you go, this is very universal in terms of information, in terms of data that is available and accessible. So we've seen this happening in the midst of the pandemic, but also it's applicable to other different projects. One thing that we're starting to realize is we're not collecting enough data, or we're not collecting the right data, the right indicators that can inform us in making changes, revisions, tweaks, and be more proactive in terms of reactive. We are supposed to be, I know it's a pretty idealistic, Chinasa will probably say, yeah, you're being idealistic, but I think we are supposed to be more proactive now in our management of the pandemic. But we are still being very reactive. I cannot possibly say that, our practitioners, our public policy practitioners, did not see variants of the coronavirus coming, because we have academics who have said that. We have had medical practitioners who have said, okay, look, if we don't, there is a possibility of different mutations and whatnot, and we need to be prepared for it, because we don't know how it's going to mutate, how it's going to affect people more. But we're still being very reactive. And why is that so? That's probably because we are just looking at very lagging indicators: death rates, infection rates, hospitalization rates. But we're not trying to be more foresighted in that. We're also not trying. Some countries are also very slow in making their data accessible to other stakeholders who can help manage and help be partners in the mitigation of it. So this is the main challenge I would say I see. And of course, you have your political aspect of things that are always there. You pander to popular votes, you pander to what most people would like, so that you remain popular, you remain in power. And also balancing that with the economic downfall and the economic sort of needs that is prevailing right now. So do you have enough financing? How do you work around that to ensure that your people are safe, alive, and also have enough basic needs? And all of this comes down to dollars and cents. How do you work around that? How do you ensure that you have that financing for it? So they're all very different layers that are interwebbed together.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dharrnesha. So as we wrap up now, let me start with Chinasa. What will be your word about? I now bring you ladies again. Let's do a part two, because there's an angle I'm really worried about. The angle where you experts are called to give their opinions, but at the end of it all, such inputs are never taken, because you just said something now that it's not like people who are in public health didn't know that there'll be the Delta variant and all of that. But when they make their recommendations, somehow they just feel, oh, we don't have that money to sponsor these, or there's no fund for these, or let's finish with these, or you just find unnecessary delays, and then it happens. I know some countries who would have saved a whole lot of issues if they had just closed their borders while all this was happening. But they were like, oh no, let's just still leave, we need to eat and all of that. And before you knew, so much had happened. So Chinasa, what would be your final word of advice as we wrap up the show?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dharrnesha. So, let me first of all make an input to Dharrnesha's previous point. When she was mentioning about data availability, whether it's even the right one, or is being collected enough. What one conversation that I was having with a professor in the Kwame Nkrumah University last week was even about data usage, like we've talked about. And the fact that because there's a disconnect between the research institutions, i.e., the universities, and government, the policymakers, most of the researchers are becoming uninterested or weary to even.
Do call. I don't know what happened. I think I found you. Oh, yes, please go on. Go on.
Okay. Yeah. So
You said the researchers are
when
worried.
they
Yeah.
yeah, because they're worried, they are becoming uninterested in doing extensive research because the government is not taking them up. You still come and tell them, this is what the data is saying, this is what the evidence is showing, and this is the way we think you should go. They take them, they put them under the locker, and they go do popular things because they want people to see them build roads, buy flashy cars, or dash them money and the rest of them, and they leave the most important thing, the most important responsibility of governance, which is protection of life and property of the citizens and the country. So I was having this conversation, and the professor, so it brings me to Dharrnesha's point to why we are having so much issues around the world generally, and even including this COVID response. It's not like we don't know what we are supposed to do. I wouldn't think that the people in government don't just know anything, like they have tabla rasa brain. No, they do. But they choose to do things that are quick, very quick and fast to gain glory. And this is not supposed to be so. We are supposed to be solving problem in a very sustainable way to protect the lives of our citizens that we've sworn to when we came into office, and also to maintain the integrity of the country generally. But things are not working that way, and I believe that if we have more collaboration between the research institutions, the uptake of their recommendation, and the action, like Dharrnesha said, proactive measures. This is what the data is saying. Even though we are not 100%, there is never 100% science. There's always gonna be some percentage of error, but you have a data that an evidence that is convincing enough for you to take decision. Why not start from there? And then we can be able to amend instead of running helter skelter all the time. And then for my advice, and this I'll take I'll focus specifically to the career space. Now is a time that we've seen the import of technology in the way we do things. If you look at the trend, small scale businesses that incorporated technology into what they do have seen to be to be rising, to be gaining prominence during this COVID outbreak, because technology has come to be the center of things that we in the way we do things. So as a career person, we shouldn't be thinking about the old ways of doing things where you schedule a meeting, you need to drive 3 hours to the meeting venue, you need to do, all this and all that. There are smarter ways to do things, and that's what COVID has shown us. And those smart ways are in support of the precautionary measures that we have now. So if we try to cut off our, transmission rates by, first of all, being responsible to yourself, maintain all the safety measures, but also see a way to be efficient with that process in delivering your work, would first we would achieve our set out goal in terms of our work deliverable, and also help the response generally. And I would implore everyone to think smartly, to do things efficiently, and to support the efforts of government and public health officials in order for us to fight and conquer this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chinasa. So I'll come to Dharrnesha small for you to wrap it. What's your final words of advice, and what do you think forward we can start doing differently?
Sure. I think I just want to highlight some of the, maybe I want to end on a brighter note, because I think we've been, digging in the challenges and the shortcomings and whatnot, but, let's look on the other side as well, just to balance it out. I mean, we've seen the advent of science and technology. We've seen, never, I think, in, at least, if correct me if I'm wrong, but never in history we've seen a vaccine that's been developed so quickly. We've seen the height of global cooperation, right? We've seen like scientists from different institutions, from different places coming together to work towards developing the vaccine. We've seen global cooperation in terms of the COVAX. I mean, there are flaws here and there, but we've seen all these different partnerships and the urgency of things that makes you realize that things can come together. People can come together when push comes to shove to make things happen. We've also seen our health structure, our public health structure, really showing what it's capable, what can be done. We've seen the humanity side of things, people, community workers, even normal civilians helping one another, organizing themselves and doing that. We've also seen in developing countries, or maybe countries where mental health is a taboo topic, that's being brought to the forefront. Governments are realizing that this is a big issue. We cannot ignore it, and it's being taken into account in more planning going forward. We've also seen more urgency in the issue of climate change. Stronger, like for example, the latest IPCC report has used its most strongest language, which is it could be interpreted as something that's severe, that's urgent, but that also shows on the flip side that there is that push saying, okay, we need to do this right away. We have to address this. So we've seen all these things, and also just what like Chinasa has mentioned, we've seen a smarter way of doing things. We've seen workspaces shifting to more efficient and smarter ways, and also just, I guess, finally showing the cracks in our system, the cracks in our foundation, and what needs to be done. So all of these things, I take it as a brighter perspective, a brighter note, because now we understand some things are being brought to the forefront that were previously being ignored, or just there, but no one's doing anything about it. We've also seen how people can come together at that speed that we've seen, especially with the development of the vaccine. Like, that is really impressive. And all of these things has shown great strides, great progress, and we should not stop. We should leverage on this and keep continuing. We shouldn't stop and, wait for the next pandemic to happen and therefore start again. So I think on a larger perspective, the issue, I'm just going to slightly mention the issue in climate change. It is something that we need to address. It was something we needed to address 20, 30 years ago, but it is something that we have to address right now and going forward, right? And that at that momentum that we are going, because it affects everything. It affects your health, it affects your environment, it even affects livelihood, agriculture, food security. It is part of human nature and human living, like Chinasa rightfully mentioned. And so that is something we need to continuously address personally, individually. Make sure you're doing your due diligence, keep yourself safe so that you can keep other people safe. Mask up. If you can, get yourself vaccinated, practice good hygiene good hygiene practices, and businesses, employers, make sure your staff is safe. Ventilation is the cheapest thing you could do. Raise up your windows, install fans. It works, because if you understand the science of airflow, I think it's pretty rudimentary, then that's the most cost-effective thing that you can do. So it's all about taking accountability and responsibility to keeping yourself and others safe. So that's really from me.
Yeah. Thank you very much, ladies. I'm really, really amazed and grateful to have both of you join me on the show today. So, people, this is the size of and don't forget that will be up on YouTube and Facebook pages. That's Shagalenko TV, and you can share them, and just share with friends. Lastly, Tisha, Inbah, Rajah said, interesting and enlightening discussion. Honestly, it was an interesting one. I could just go on and on and on, but then network is wanting us to just respect ourselves and just this. But I promise, ladies, we'll find time to reach out to you once again at part two of this, because there's so many layers of this whole thing that we really need to talk about. Chinasa has mentioned some of them, and even Dharrnesha also talked about it, that it's a roller coaster, so to say. It affects the finances as well. So, fertility, environment, and all of that. So much is happening. Even when it comes to our reproductive health and right, it's a whole lot of issues. Hey, this is how we want to stop it for today. Thanks to everyone who joined us. I know countries who watch us, people from different countries who watch us are still sleeping, and then they wake up maybe 6 or 8 hours to watch the show. Please keep your comments there. That helps us to also reach out to our guests and also include whatever questions or comments that you have in the next set of that we'll have with them. But thank you all for joining us, and thanks ConnexUs for also supporting all we do here. My name is Ambassador Emmanuel Gabari. Thanks to my guests once again just joined us. I must say you've missed a whole lot, but the video is there. You could go back and watch. And we've been looking at COVID-19. What should people begin to do in the line of duty for people in the front line, for health workers, for who render services, that their daily lives are also on the line, doing all of these jobs. And we've been talking with Chinasa U Imo. He's an international development health policy strategist. Also Dharrnesha Inbah Rajah, a public SPS part, and also with Men Associate Chicago. Thank you so much, ladies, for finding time to and thanks Dharrnesha for waking you up, 6 hours the time. Every time we have guests, Asia, Canada, the US, and all of that, I am really, really happy, but also apologetic. Sorry for taking you out time in for a lot of countries, and we sincerely appreciate you for being there. And once again, Chinasa, thanks so much. You are like a stakeholder as Rajah could pay. Thank you very much, ladies, for finding time to join. Okay, people, this is the size we'll have for once again. I would say thanks for joining us. Let's do this again on Tuesday. We are to do the Tuesday's edition. God bless you all and have a beautiful Saturday. Bye-bye.